Last July 11th, thousands of Cubans took to the streets in the island's biggest anti-government protest in decades. The demonstrations were aimed at Cuban authorities, but they cannot be understood without looking at U.S. policy.
The United States stands firmly with the people of Cuba.
And with God's help, a free Cuba is what we will soon achieve.
Since 2017, Cuba's economy has been devastated by sanctions imposed by Trump and maintained by Biden.
El bloqueo sí nos ha causado bastante problema.
Para ayudar al pueblo cubano. Qué falta de respeto.
Ellos pueden decir lo que ellos quieran. La realidad se ve en cada cosa que sucede.
In 2021, economic conditions in Cuba hit rock bottom. U.S. sanctions were restricting Cuba's access to investment, credit, and foreign currency. On top of that, Cuba's tourism industry was wiped out by COVID. On July 11th, growing frustration over scarcities of food and medicine boiled over as the Delta variant reached its peak. Biden responded to the protests by embracing the very sanctions that had helped cause the economic crisis.
We brought to bear the strength of our diplomacy, rallying nations to speak out and increase pressure on the regime.
Biden justifies U.S. sanctions by pointing to human rights abuses. On July 11th, the Cuban government detained hundreds of protesters. Many are still in jail, some condemned to long prison sentences. But Biden's concern for human rights in Cuba is dubious. The U.S. not only does not impose sanctions on countries with far worse human rights violations, it even sends billions in aid and military hardware to some of them.
Our relationship with Saudi Arabia is important. It's important to U.S. interests.
Saudi Arabia recently executed 81 people, some accused of inciting sittings and protests. A year after July 11th, Cuba's COVID crisis is over. Cuba is the only country in Latin America to create its own vaccines, and over 90% of the population is immunized. The country's borders are open, but tourism has not returned to previous levels. With the economy still strangled by U.S. sanctions, scarcities of food, medicine, and fuel continue.
Todo estaba perdido, no había nada.
Todo malísimo y todo carísimo.
The economic crisis has sparked the biggest wave of migration of Cubans to the U.S. in 40 years. Biden's pollster warned him that migration was a political threat that could impact elections. Shortly after, the U.S. Embassy started processing visas for the first time in 5 years. The Biden administration also lifted some travel restrictions to Cuba, but these moves won't affect most Cubans. Meanwhile, Biden has kept in place most of the Trump-era sanctions, and the Cuban people are paying the price.